Good morning.
Good morning.
We have a special resolution. It doesn't have a number yet, but I'm going to read it to you. It says that Ms. Lauren L. Welch will be the permanent MC at all
For all future
at all programs that we have. Do we have a unanimous consent to that? She did such a marvelous job the other day. Teresa, will you read the roll?
All righty. President Lucas,
Present.
Ms. Moss,
Here.
Mr. Joyce,
Here.
Mr. Sleesman, and Ms. Welch.
Here.
We have 5 committee members present.
Thank you very much. We will hear from the procurement department and the academic, and we are going to make our presentation.
Good morning, everyone. This is Melinda. I just wanted to let you know this is Anne Marie's first presentation for procurement today.
We will treat you lightly and gently.
Good morning. Chair Lucas, members of the board, committee members. My name is Kirk Dimmick. I'm the engineering project manager for Bridges, and I'm here this morning to present the summary of the proposed award for engineering services for special bridge inspections, presenting it to the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee. So this program, Special Bridge Inspections, is a biennial program. Every 2 years, under federal mandate, we go out and we look at our special bridges. We have a little over 100 bridges in our system. This is a map showing the entire rail system. The bridges in the top part of the slide highlight those special bridges. It accounts for about half of the structures. There's 46 of them. They're listed in red below at the bottom of the slide. And we'll look at a closer view to see those specific locations. So you can see it's across both the east and west lines. We don't have anything on the waterfront line or the green and blue lines, but we do have special bridges on the trunk line, the joint territories, and the red line east and west. So these particular structures are set up to have a hands-on inspection because they're all steel bridges, and we're looking specifically at the tension members, the steel tension members. And we're calling these non-redundant because there are less than 4 load paths to carry the load across the structure down to the foundation. So our short acronym for this are STEN members, carrying those service load paths. So because these are specialized bridges and the way they're configured, where they are, we require a team of inspectors that actually have to climb some of these. So it makes sense to hire a specialized crew that does this every day for a living. They have special skills. When we climb above the tracks on our trusses, we have to close the line, turn the power off, and they climb it a lot more efficiently than I ever would. So we are meeting the federal requirements in this biennial STEN inspection program. So it comes down to we're managing the risk. We do look at our bridges every year. The in-house team is out looking at all the bridges every year, and we document those findings. But every 2 years, we get up close and personal, hands-on, meaning at arm's length. So we're actually within your arm's length of that detail to see the specific element. Nationwide, there has been a history of problems with these types of bridges. So the federal government has called these out as very special bridges. They want them looked at very closely, very carefully by these skilled professionals. So we document our procedures for each team that goes out. It could be a different team every 2 years. So the procedures are documented to give them an idea of how to get to the bridge, whether there's a special permit involved. Some of them are fairly simple to get to, others are very difficult to get to. Whenever we're dealing with NS or CSX, it's tough. And then we document our findings every year for those follow-up teams that come in. They know where the problems exist, if any, and they zero in on those particular members again. So what is a critical finding? This is what we're really trying to manage. A critical finding is a defect or a deficiency in one of those elements that we find in the bridge. I will mention that the last round of looking at these 40-some bridges, we did not have a critical finding. So our system's in good health, but we're mandated to do this, document it, and our SSO committee looks for those results every year, and then they see that we also do it every 2 years, specialized. And then we document our findings. We pick up data out in the field with our electronic tablet. So we have an electronic, easy data management system in place, and then we have hard copy backups for that, so we can distribute copies of results accordingly. So with that, I will hand it over to Anne Marie.
Thanks, Kurt. Good morning. My name is Anne Marie Prebish, and I'm the contract administrator for the Special Bridge Inspections Procurement. The request for proposal, or RFP, was issued January 16th, 2023. It was accessed on the GC RTA website by 35 interested parties. 2 firms provided a proposal. 1 firm was determined to be responsive, and was interviewed. The evaluation panel members included representatives from engineering and project development, safety, as well as procurement. And the evaluation criteria used was project manager, assigned staff, past performance, project approach, location of majority of work, and DBE participation. The most technically qualified firm was Burgess & Nyepel, Inc. A 5% DBE goal was assigned to this project and will be met by utilizing 2LMN, Inc. and Denise's Flagging, Inc. Burgess & Nyepel, Inc., they have successfully completed projects for GCRTA, Oklahoma DOT, Summit County, and ODOT, among others. Burgess & Nyepel, Inc. has prior experience on special inspection projects and has both experienced and qualified staff. The recommendation, staff requests that the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee recommend award to Burgess & Nyepel, Inc. for engineering services for special bridge inspections. The contract is not to exceed $348,521.72 for a period of 24 months. That concludes the presentation, and we're happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, through the chair, Reverend, just curious, Anne Marie or Kurt, how long would it take on each bridge? I'm sure there's a lot of varying factors there, and size and such.
Certainly. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work to get to the point where you're looking at the structure. Typically, they're done in a day, sometimes 2. The very simple ones that have easy access, multiples can be done in that same day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Kirk, one question on these steel tension bridges. Why are, if you can do this in layman's terms, is this type of bridge of concern to the federal government versus other bridge types?
So I guess envision in simple terms, like if you had a paper clip and you're bending that paper clip back and forth over time, it may, in the end, result in a crack. develop. And once that crack or weakness develops, that crack can propagate up through that main member. And because we don't have redundant load paths, if we lost that one load path, the rest of the structure really can't support that load. So that's been the problem, where these members sort of pull themselves apart. The I-35 bridge that came apart over the Mississippi back in '09, it pulled itself apart. It was an exact same type of structure. It was a deck truss that we have like on the viaduct. So any deck truss in the U.S., it's in that category.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I have a question. These are old bridges. These are old bridges, and they must have a lifetime. So, like, what would happen if we found a stress crack, because also we don't have redundant tracks and all? So, do we have any plan to replace those bridges in the long term, which I know would be really, really expensive? Or what would we do in the event that we had a stress fracture?
Fortunately, these are repairable defects when found. We actually had one on Lorraine where we found some cracking, and we went through a capital improvement project that repaired those members, and we were able to reinstate service back on the structure. So when work's done, we can either stop service altogether or single track, depending on the deficiency. Fortunately, these are riveted structures and not welded. It's typically nationwide, the problems have come about because of poor welding. So the old-time bridge is still tried and true in our case. So we're very fortunate in that regard.
Yes, Mayor?
A question, who has I assume we have a current contract for these services. Who's providing the services today?
So these are biennial, so they have to finish them within that contract year. They usually close out within about a year's time. So this contract will probably close early next year, but all the work has to be done, the field work has to be done this year. The previous group that did this was Burgess and Nipel that did the group, but it is open to any of the experts that are in our region. The challenge for them is to fit this bulk of work in their current schedule when we put it out there. So we try to time it the best we can.
And is the pricing roughly similar to the current contract, or is it, I'm just trying to gauge how inflation and other things are affecting
Yeah,
it?
actually, I thought we did pretty well.
Yeah.
We did add the viaduct bridge to this, spans 3 and 4. That one actually requires several days to investigate below and above the structure. So I think we got a good price for it. Unfortunately, it costs what it does. If we brought in teams of experts, it would be hard to justify those costs for, as an in-house group. It's just
Mayor Weiss, this is Melinda. Just wanted to also advise that this came in right under the estimate for this project, and it's about 6% over what we paid last time 2 years ago. But again, we did add the viaduct bridge to it, so it's well within the estimate.
And apples to oranges a little
Yes.
bit. Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? All right. Thank you very much.
thank you.
And this goes up to the board for next week?
Yes, we need a motion and a second. Is your microphone
That's what I
on,
thought.
Reverend?
Yeah, we have a motion to send it to the board.
Motion, Terry Joyce.
Second.
Second Welch.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. All right, now we have the procurement, and we'll hear from Joseph Schaefer and Lou Castellani.
Good morning, Chair Lucas, members of the committee, members of the board. As you said, I'm Joe Schaefer, Director of Engineering, here to talk to you about on-call construction inspection services for 2023. The project overview, it's to perform construction inspection for projects that exceed the capacity or expertise of GCRTA personnel. The works by task order assignment. The total task orders are not to exceed $450,000 over a 24-month term, and they're both bus and rail project assignments. Some of the anticipated projects coming up are, of course, the Warrensville-Van Aken Station reconstruction, the light rail trunk line signal system replacement, the West 117th Bridge and Platform rehabilitation, and the Brook Park Yard 515 turnout project, as well as other outside agency and ODOT construction projects. And now Lou Catalucci from Procurement.
Good morning. My name is Lou Catalucci. I am the contract administrator for this project. This request for proposal was issued March 20th, 2023. It was accessed on our website by 28 interested parties. 3 firms proposed and 3 firms were interviewed. The evaluation panel members were made up of engineering and project management, Office of Business Development, Office of Management and Budget, Safety, and Procurement. This was a Brooks Act procurement. In the Brooks Act procurement, there are 2 phases. The first phase is a technical proposal that is received and reviewed by our panel. Then the highest ranking proposer is selected for interviews and price discussions. Our recommended vendor is Hill International, Inc. Their office is in Broadview Heights. There is a 13% DBE goal for this project, and it will be met by using SOMAT Engineering, Inc. SOMAT Engineering is located here in Cleveland. From experience, Hill International, Inc. has successfully completed projects for GCRTA, ODOT, the Cuyahoga County Department of Public Works, and the City of Cleveland, among others. The firm was established in 1976, and they have an experienced and qualified staff. They are currently working on the waterfront bridge rehabilitation project for us. Staff requests that the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee recommend award to Hill International, Inc. for on-call construction inspection 2023. The contract is an amount not to exceed $450,000 for a period of 24 months. We would be happy to address any questions you may have.
All right, questions from the board? Questions from the board? All right. Looks like your presentation is well accepted. We have a motion to send this on.
Motion to take to the full board, Karen?
Second?
Second, Sleesman.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Welch.
Moss, second.
Second. That's not debatable. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee members. We now move to the committee of the whole board, where we have the roll call.
All right. President Lucas.
Present.
Ms. Moss. Here. Mayor Biassiata. Mr. Joyce.
Here.
Mayor Kumar.
Here.
Ms. Mersman.
Here.
Mr. Sleesman.
Here.
Mayor Weiss.
Present.
And Ms. Welch.
Here.
We have 8 board members present.
All right. We're going to hear about the advertising policy. As you know, we've had some different policies that have come forth, and I understand they have now pulled everything together for us. Natoya, our minor, will report, Sharon Jenkins, and Don Tarka.
Good morning. Am I good? Good morning, Reverend Lucas, members of the board. My name is Sharon Jenkins. I'm the Director of Marketing, and I'm here this morning to introduce you to our proposed advertising policy. A little bit of background. Our current advertising guidelines provide general parameters for advertising content. It was last updated in July of 2021 as an administrative procedure. We are now proposing a policy to be adopted by the board. The policy expressly states what advertising will be permitted and prohibited and will enable RTA to consistently manage advertising to reflect RTA's mission and public image. In compiling our policy, we researched 10 transit agencies from within the state of Ohio and nationally, and they are listed on the slide above. We also reached out to these agencies and asked if they had a board policy for advertising, and of the ones that responded, all but one do. RTA's shelter and transit advertising sales contract expires at the end of this year. That contractor sells, produces, installs, and removes advertising on GCRTA shelters in Cleveland and on vehicles, on our coaches, on and in our coaches and rail cars. This policy that we are proposing, if passed, will be included in the request for proposal package that is scheduled to go out promptly in order to make a recommendation of award to the board this October. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dawn.
The advertising policy will be placed in the code book alongside another First Amendment provision that relates to public assembly on authority property, because this policy also has First Amendment implications. And the reason why we're adopting a policy and proposing it be adopted by the board is because that would assist the authority in defending a legal challenge if one were to come up related to a particular advertisement. Staff requests that the Committee of the Whole recommend this provision to the Board of Trustees for approval. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board?
Yes. Dawn, can you just highlight for us, like, what are, like, the, I guess highlight, I mean, is self-evident, but, you know, just give us a thumbnail sketch of, and the public, what our provisions are.
The proposed policy is going to specifically identify what types of advertising are not permitted and what types of advertising are permitted. The permitted advertising will include commercial advertising, advertising related to the authority's transit operations, public service announcements, and paid political advertising. The prohibited advertising is a longer list. Bear with me. It includes advertising that contains material that discriminates on the basis of race, color, marital status, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, ancestry, age, sex, gender identity, disability, medical condition, or military status. It also prohibits advertising related to alcohol, marijuana, tobacco products, and related products and services, profanity, violence, unlawful goods, services, or conduct, sexual activity, products, or sexually oriented services, firearms, gambling, unauthorized endorsements, false, misleading, libelous, or deceptive advertising, copyright infringements, trademark violations, or otherwise unlawful advertising, advertising tending to impede transit safety or disrupt traffic, unclear identification of the advertiser, and unpaid advertising. And the prohibitions are basically intended to support RTA's vision and mission of connecting the community and RTA's brand.
All right. Anybody else? Yes, Kelly.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious, does this policy address only visual advertising, images, and copy, or does it also pertain to anything spoken or audible? Like, for example, ads playing on buses or something like that.
I didn't hear the last part.
For example, ads playing on buses or something like that. Is this policy purely for visual advertising?
This policy is purely for visual advertising.
Okay, thank you. I'm also curious, just in general, how we set the pricing for advertisements. Is that through the contract with the vendor?
Good morning. The answer to that question is through the vendor. This is a revenue generating contract, and so the proposed vendors that will respond will set their pricing, and that will be negotiated through a procurement department.
Okay, thank you. Another question I had relates, I think this policy does a very good job of addressing content guidelines. Something else that I've been thinking about, especially while riding the bus, are design guidelines, where advertisements are placed, the impact on the windows, things like that. And I know that there are different treatments on our buses right now. Some have different sorts of translucency or transparency. And I wonder if there was any discussion among staff or any thought about placement and design guidelines in addition to the content guidelines presented here.
Approximately a year ago, we had a conversation with our internal safety, Steve Paganoff, about the placement and what the pixels would look like. You're referencing the windows. And based on those conversations at that time, as long as transit police can see in and passengers can see out, it's allowable. So that is something that we have discussed, and it will continue to be on the table because we want to make sure that both our riders are safe and that transit police can also see inside the vehicles.
So do we have standards that kind of measure that? Or how does the vendor know how to translate that into the ads that are fabricated and installed on the vehicles?
Last year when this came up, we had a direct conversation with our existing vendor, Lamar, and there are some standards along pixels. I don't have that numeric number in front of me right now, but certainly whomever our vendor is the next time, if it's Lamar or other, we will have those conversations because number one, we want to make sure that our riders are always safe, and we know that they're safe when they can look out of the windows and that our transit police officers can see directly into the vehicles. So those are ongoing conversations. The way that we manage the contract is we have ongoing conversations with the vendor. So the vendor is not left out there just based on who the ads will be. There's ongoing conversation. Sharon Jenkins and myself speak with our current vendor probably weekly about different advertisements and different things. So those standards, those conversations, those concerns, we raise those, and those have been preserved in our conversations.
Okay, thank you. I do wonder with the update of the policy, especially the administrative guidelines, if there's an opportunity to formalize that a little bit more and just evaluate what makes sense from the rider's perspective, from the inside, as well as security from the outside. I know that there are different experiences during daylight as well as nighttime, and just kind of institutionalizing that, especially in the administrative policy that doesn't need to come back to the board, I think would be very helpful.
I do have a comment, if I can. Good morning, everyone.
Go ahead. I was going to comment.
In response to the question about placement of the ads, if you look at the draft of the administrative procedure that we shared with the board under 3.4, placement, administration, and enforcement, you'll see under subparagraph A, it says placement, that GCRTA will determine the interior and exterior spaces that will serve as appropriate locations for all advertising, that we reserve the right to modify, change, or alter the location and sizes of the available ad spaces. And I think that gets to your point about windows and size and what may or may not obstruct the view. But we have the discretion as far as that piece goes. The code book section that you're being asked to consider for adoption by the board would give the general manager the authority to adopt the administrative guidelines, administrative procedures rather, that were provided to the board. Again, the board certainly can have input into those and provide counsel and information to the CEO, but it wouldn't be something that the general manager would have to come back to the board for approval on, because we want to be able to make sure we keep the process flowing. But we welcome the input about placement size, et cetera.
Understood, thank you. I would just recommend to the CEO that some consideration of design in addition to placement and transparency or translucency be perhaps formalized in the administrative guidelines.
Sure. And if I could just add one more thing too. The policy piece is important because we are talking about, I think as Dawn mentioned, First Amendment rights, and there has been significant review by the courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, on advertising in public spaces and by entities such as the regional transit system that we are a part of. And so when it comes to size and location, et cetera, we do have a lot more latitude in that regard. The courts don't really weigh so much into where you put them and the size, et cetera, but content is the thing that they do take a very close look at. Having a policy will definitely having a board-approved policy, let me be clear about that. Having a board-approved policy puts us in much better, a sounder position, but more importantly, it is more transparent and alerts the public as to what it is we are permitting and what it is we are not permitting.
Yes, thank you so much. So this is a great conversation. I always expect a lot of dialogue on this kind of item. So just kind of listening into all of the different opinions. This is something I'll say that I'm very proud of the staff to be able to put in front of you. We had a gray, if I could describe it, policy prior that was very loose, very generic, and left a lot of wiggle room for interpretation about what our standards are, what our branding guidelines should really be. And then also we got into conversations with our vendor and those that were trying to put ads on our vehicles, for example, about what's appropriate and what really falls in line with our mission and vision. And since we have updated that mission and vision over the last couple of years, this is really timely because we're able to maneuver through that. And as mentioned by General Counsel, a kind of sanctioned, approved policy really puts us in line to be able to defend some of those decisions that we can make without getting into a legal battle about First Amendment rights and freedom of speech. I will say that it might be helpful as we go through the year to have marketing come back and give a little bit of a breakdown about how the contract works so that you understand what's revenue generating, how much of a dollar amount we're really talking about on an annualized basis, and so you can really understand what impact that has, not only just branding wise, but financially. There are some agencies that decide not to do advertising at all. There are some that have it truncated, to just the internal projects, and this is really, I think, our bite at the apple to really kind of create that messaging matrix and guidelines so that we can continue to do advertising. And then as we keep reviewing the process and see if it's worth the time and the money, we can make additional proposals to the board to adjust it over time. I will say, hopefully not being too long-winded, we've gotten a lot of good community impacts and relationship building processes going over the last few years under Natoya and Sharon's leadership, and kind of changing the face of how we interact with the community. And because we've done so much on the community-facing side, we're starting to get a lot of kind of phone calls. Hey, can we advertise on this? Can we advertise on that? And it's a relatively new resurgence of how we do business, so this is really helpful for us to do that. One thing I will say, I absolutely hear you, Ms. Mersman, as far as the, we call it the dot matrix. It was kind of alluded to that. I will ask Doc if he has any additional information on that or input, but before we do, that came up in my original conversation with some of the folks, for example, from CPT and some of our writers, maybe about a year or two, maybe even more when I first came on board. That's a pretty typical response from writers because you want to be able to look outside and see. We have brought that up with vendors. I would say that although it may not be applicable in this particular administration of the policy, there is a standard SOP for us to be able to review that, and if it needs to be updated, we can do that there, so that there's a safety and operational input to make sure that there's a review of that, as well as transit police as necessary, so that you have that security. A lot of those standards, it's been a conversation piece for a long time in the industry, and a lot of those standards have been updated and reviewed. There are opportunities for us to put within our relationship with the vendor that's doing the application, or either the way we do it in-house, to have certain vent windows that are excluded from designs. So for example, that you'll be able to have a lighter and not so much of a dark contrast in the window coloring for those windows that are pretty accessible for customers versus, a height restriction. So we can definitely talk about that, but I'd like to reserve that for the operational part of the business so that we can kind of be flexible and make sure that that design is approved by our safety, and that's a continual process. So we'll definitely refine that, but we do have that there, so I appreciate that for sure. Doc, if you have any additional information from facilities or bus maintenance.
Yes. Good morning, President Lucas, members of the board. I'm Flaunsay Caver, the Chief Operating Officer here at the Greater Cleveland RTA. So we do have, I don't know the specific, but we do actually have a policy in process. As many of you are aware, the standard bus, the standard white Gillig bus, has sort of a blue and red and white insignia going through. That is prescribed to our vendor with that dot matrix and visibility goal. And we also give that to the vendors who are working with Natoya's revenue generation so that enough light can come through so that you can see out of it. As Dr. Walker Minor mentioned, we do constantly will get comments, and we do review to make sure that the safety is still maintained and that you can always see through the vehicle. But we do actually have a process and a policy that determines how many dots or how translucent the lighting must be there.
Thank you, Doc. And then one other thing I did want to mention that I think is worth noting, I can't remember who said it from the board, please forgive me, it might have been Ms. Mersman, is the idea of how this applies to digital media and also audio, because I think that is important. And if this is our guiding light for the branding and marketing for the visual aspect, and that could be on board, interior, exterior, car cards, that kind of thing, it also should have a place in how we actually maneuver through the digital media, especially in light of social media and things like that. In past lives in different agencies, some transit companies have a separate social media policy that usually is separate than the advertising guidelines. It can be a lot more, conversational and gets a little bit deeper. So that's something we can take a look at. I would suggest, and we will also defer to General Counsel on this as well, to be able to separate that from this. But I think it's worth a look so that we make sure that we maintain the standards that we have here in how we manage our digital media presence as well, especially because we're going electronic on a lot of different formats, and that's something that we can take a look at later this year and come back to the board for recommendation as well.
And I would, that was my follow-up question to Callie's comments, make sure I understood that correctly, because to say that you don't allow gambling ads on a bus, but there's an audio advertising message on gambling is sort of counterintuitive to me. Social media may be different, but I guess I would ask you to take a hard look at that of why that couldn't apply to straight voice, audio, whatever we want to call it, ads. It doesn't make any sense to me that that wouldn't be included in this policy. And if you want to have a separate social media policy, but I guess before it comes back to the board, I'd like clarification on that, because I guess I'd want a comment from General Counsel that would seem to me to be inconsistent and maybe open the authority up to issues.
Counsel?
I'll just add that this will serve as the foundation for all of our advertising. Just yesterday, I had a conversation with Jim about billboards, because there are also billboards throughout the authority. And so in the conversation with Jim, we talked about this serving as the foundation for all of that. I will also share, as it relates to audio, car cards, any of those other things, as we go through all of that, we are constantly talking and linking that back so that it directly aligns to our mission and our vision, connecting the community and mobility solutions. And so honestly, the reason how we came to this, some things did present to us that we did not believe were in line with or reflective of the direction that RTA is going. And so we moved over the last year. Literally, it took us about 12 months working very closely with Dawn and Sharon, doing years worth of research so that we could get to this point, because what we previously had was so very generic. And so this will serve as the foundation, because we want every piece of literature that's out there advertising, that's on our vehicles, in our spaces, in our shelters, in our audio for the hearing of our customers, to be reflective of what we're doing. And that is literally connecting to the community, the anchor institutions in this community, so that we can build up the community in City of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County.
Thanks, Natoya. Just really quickly so that we can circle back. If you're not prepared at this time, Janet, that's fine. Any comment on the audio?
Sure, thank you. I was just trying to wait. Since Natoya had approached the podium, I didn't want to interrupt her. We were focusing primarily with this policy on advertisement that we sell, and we were looking at advertisement that is public facing, and so that is the focus in mind here. And so if there is some digital advertising that we sell, I'm not aware of it. If there's audio so what I'm saying,
No.
most of the audio that we do is we control that, and it is for the sake of our customers, our employees, but we do not market that piece. But we can certainly make clear that if there's any unreadiness or concern about that, we can certainly clarify that in the subsequent resolution that will come to you for approval. But that is certainly in the event that our plans change and our focus changes and we start entering into that area. I think it would be incumbent upon us to make sure that digital and audio advertisement, that in the event that we decide to sell, would contain these same parameters. We don't really want to deviate one from the other. So we could certainly take a look at that. But this is advertising we sell, and if you look at the administrative procedure, it talks about on our vehicles, on our property, billboards, et cetera. This is the focus of that.
Yeah.
I think that just like in concluding, tying that up, is we don't have audio ads on our vehicles or at our bus shelters.
Correct. We do not sell advertising for audio or for digital at this time, but should that be added, this new policy would apply.
Yeah, I would, both correct. I would agree that we need to make sure that it's included in the final draft generically, so that if we get to the point, which is coming pretty soon, right, as far as the digital ad and marketing, as you even think about the kiosk kind of culture that's happening and being able to look at different bus stops that have digital media, we're starting to look at that. There's a lot of our sister agencies that have that already, where you can kind of flip your advertising while you wait for a bus. And that would be something to think about, where we would have the same standards, and we want to make sure that it's consistent and applicable. So I will ask legal to look at amending that to make sure that that's generically included in the event that we dip our toes in the waters of the digital media and audio sales, to make sure that we're consistent.
All right. Any other questions?
I have a couple questions. First, I'd just like to echo Ms. Mersman's comments about visibility on vehicles and in shelters. But aside from that, does this apply, or how does this relate to third-party vendors? I'm not so much worried about, say, a maintenance crew might have advertising on their truck, but maybe paratransit vehicles who are customer-facing that are subcontractors, or if for some reason the transit app starts selling ads, for example, and we're having customers buying fares in there and seeing advertisements in there, do we have anything that filters down to those, or is that up to them entirely?
Good morning, Reverend Lucas, members of the board. Again, this is Flance, Mr. Sleesman. I'll answer the transit app version. So in those apps that we're working with that are open source apps, we do not have the ability to determine if they're how they take ads and what those ads would be in there. However, if we were to be able to, if we had a situation where we were totally opposed as an agency, then we would have to use a different app. So go from transit app to Move It or some other app. For the buses, the paratransit buses, I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you as to if we control the advertising on their vehicles. I don't know the answer. I'll find out for you and get back to you.
Yeah, that's okay. I wouldn't have necessarily expected it at this point, but just kind of wanted to reinforce that things like that are not seen necessarily as separate from RTA when it comes to our customers. A second question I had, and this is mainly out of curiosity, was there any discussion or conversation either internally or with other authorities who have advertising policies about the paid political advertising? Again, I'm not necessarily of any opinion yet, but I could see something in which it were awkward that we are seen to be endorsing XYZ. And I know it says that all the paid political advertising material shall state paid political advertising. And that is great, and that's fine. And are there any expectations in terms of the visibility or size of that in relation to the rest of the ad, that kind of thing? So if there is something that is up there that a decent amount of our customer base would find questionable, there were at least something that were also very visible to say, hey, look, this is paid political advertising. We're neutral when it comes to who gets this, but we want to make sure that it's not associated as an endorsement from RTA.
Mr. Sleesman, if I may step backwards one moment to your question about third-party contractors. We have contractual relationships with our paratransit contractors. Correct. There's a term in that contract that provides that RTA reserves advertising space on those vehicles for its own use. So my understanding is we currently do not sell that advertising, correct, but we would have the ability to do so under the contract if we chose.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dawn, that's correct. The contractors, the subcontractors, our paratransit contractors are under contract with us and must adhere to our policies and procedures, including their subcontractors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn.
All right. Anybody else?
Agree with that, if I may. That's much like, and great question, that's much like our safety standards, wearing seatbelts, no cell phones, similar things, uniform, all of that. So typically within, and Melinda can correct me if incorrect, but typically within those contracts, there's provisions for liquidated damages, rollback of service, being able to kind of have those kind of understanding meetings and discussions so that their contracts depend on their ability to adhere to our standards because they are part of the brand, whether the public knows the nuances of the contract or not. So definitely agree with that. Regarding the political and paid activity, the section that you're referencing is section D, I believe, of the page 2. And that was something that we've talked about extensively, understanding that we also are comprised of a board that has 3 mayors. It has also different political appointees. It's really important to make sure that RTA's views are not misconstrued as us endorsing any candidate, for example, going for office or some particular item that's out on the ballot. So that's why we wanted to make sure that we maintain the ability to have folks be able to pay for advertising, because you might end up in situations where you have those restrictions that end up in a legal court of law because you can be perceived as picking one over the other. And if one company is paying for advertisement, then why would not that same political company or party be able to do that, as long as it's not in conflict with our mission and our vision? That's where we sort of drew that line to make sure that we weren't endorsing something that was clearly a no-no through the remainder of the policy. But we are very sensitive to that. We wanted to make sure that the board was aware and had buy-in and feedback if there were other options that we should be evaluating. But at this time, we also make sure that we don't endorse any political activity on our premises. There have been, requests to be able to have those kind of ballot conversations in our districts and in our garages, and we make sure that we prohibit that as well, especially during times of election and races and those kind of things. So we will keep a very close eye on that, but that was one that I brought up probably about 5 times and drove everybody nuts. So very well noted.
All right. We have a motion to take this up.
So moved, Mayor Weiss.
Second.
Second, Mayor Kumar.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? All right, thank you very much. Anything else?
Thank you.
Have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second, Welch.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Go to our next committee. Is Mayor Kumar.
Would like to call to order the RTA Audit, Safety, Compliance, and Real Estate Committee. Teresa, if you could please call roll.
Mayor Kumar,
Here.
Ms. Moss,
Here.
Mr. Joyce,
Here.
Ms. Mersman,
Here.
and Mayor Weiss.
Here.
We have 5 committee members present.
We have one item on the agenda today, and it's an executive session requested to consider the purchase of property for public purposes or the sale of property at competitive bidding. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved. Mayor Weiss.
Second, Karen.
Roll call, please.
Okay, Mayor Kumar,
Yes.
Ms. Moss, Mr. Joyce,
Yes.
Ms. Mersman,
Yes.
and Mayor Weiss.
Yes.
We have 5 ayes and none opposed.
Okay, at this point, we're going to have the executive session, and I would invite all board members to attend, and from the CEO, General Manager's perspective, you could let us know who would you like to have in that executive session? adjourn executive session?
I think, Karen, did you move?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Second, Mayor Weiss.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great.
All right.
Is there a motion to?
I believe I need to call the roll to come out.
Oh, yeah, call roll.
Okay. Mayor Kumar?
Yes.
Ms. Moss?
Here.
Mr. Joyce?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Mersman?
Yes.
And Mayor Weiss?
Yes.
5 ayes, none opposed.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn the committee session?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Mersman.
Great. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.